My parents ignored my college graduation in Madison, leaving me with nothing but a bouquet I bought myself. But 6 years later, when an industry leak revealed my $5 million monthly income, they suddenly remembered I existed. It took exactly 48 hours for the sweet voicemails to start. I agreed to their family dinner. But not for a reunion. I am going back to deliver an audit they never saw coming. My name is Addie Rivera. The last time I felt truly invisible was 6 years ago, standing in the humid afternoon heat of a stadium parking lot in Madison, Wisconsin. I was wearing a polyester gown that trapped sweat against my skin and clutching a diploma cover that felt lighter than the tuition debt attached to it. Around me, the world was a cacophony of camera shutters and champagne corks popping. Fathers were lifting daughters into the air. Mothers were weeping into silk handkerchiefs, adjusting tassels, and straightening collars. I stood by a gray concrete pillar, watching them. My row of reserved seats had remained empty for the entire 3-hour ceremony. I had checked them 5 times, hoping to see a familiar face, hoping to see my mother's meticulously styled hair or my father's expensive suit. But there was nothing but 3 empty folding chairs, gathering dust while other families squeezed in tight, thigh to thigh, to cheer for their graduates. I looked down at the bouquet in my hands. It was a bundle of supermarket carnations I had bought for myself at a gas station on the way to the campus. The plastic wrap crinkled under my grip. I walked to the nearest trash can, dropped the flowers on top of a pile of discarded soda cups, and made a silent vow. I promised myself I would never again wait for people who did not want to come. Fast forward 6 years. I was sitting in a glass-walled office in Chicago, staring at a digital document that would change the trajectory of my life. The company was a private firm called Sentinel Logic, a ghost in the corporate machine that specialized in risk compliance for high-frequency AI trading systems. They did not hire people to write code. They hired people to find the lies in the code. The contract on the table was unprecedented. It was not a standard employment agreement. It was a bounty hunter's retainer. My job was to lead the audit team that stress-tested their neural networks against financial fraud. Because I had a reputation for seeing patterns where others only saw static, I had negotiated terms that made the partners sweat. The base salary was irrelevant. The clause that mattered was the success fee. I was to receive a percentage of every dollar of fraud I prevented, based on their current bleed rate. My projected take-home pay was calculated at roughly $5 million a month. $5 million, every 30 days. I signed the document with a blue ballpoint pen, my hand steady. I walked out of that building not as Addie the forgotten daughter, but as Addie the liability shield. I thought I could keep it quiet. I thought I could stay a ghost. But money like that has a gravitational pull. It bends light. It attracts attention. The leak did not happen in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. It happened in a niche industry newsletter, a subscription-only PDF read by headhunters and corporate spies. It was a single paragraph analyzing the highest-paid compliance officers in the fintech sector. There, in black and white, was my name next to the valuation of my compensation package. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. 48 hours later, my phone, which had been silent on birthdays and holidays for half a decade, began to vibrate off the edge of my desk. I looked at the screen. The name displayed was Mom. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. A text message slid into the notification bar from my father. Addie, please pick up. We saw the news about your new position. We are so proud. Family is important. Come home for dinner this weekend. Then came a notification from my younger brother. It was just a heart emoji, followed by a sad face emoji, as if we were close, as if he had not spent the last 6 years posting photos of family vacations in Aspen and the Hamptons, none of which included me. I sat in my darkened living room, the city lights of Chicago sprawling out below me, and listened to the voicemail my mother had left. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was high, sweet, and trembling with an affection I had never heard directed at me. She called me her brilliant girl. She said they had missed me. She asked if I liked seafood risotto, because she was planning to make it just for me. I almost deleted the message. I almost blocked the number and went back to my life of seven-figure audits and solitary evenings. But then I remembered the box. I walked to my safe, punched in the 6-digit code, and pulled out a small, battered metal box. It had belonged to Aunt Rosa. Rosa was not technically my aunt, but she was the only woman who had ever held me when I had a fever, the only one who had attended my high school plays. She had taken me in when my parents sent me away to Oregon at age 7. Claiming the schools were better, though we all knew they just wanted me out of the family portrait, Rosa had died 2 years ago, before she passed. She gave me a heavy iron key and a sealed envelope. On the front of the envelope, in her shaky, cursive handwriting, she had written, "Open this only when they start acting like they love you." I had kept it sealed for 2 years because I never thought that day would come. I thought their indifference was permanent. I tore open the envelope. Inside was not a letter of love, but a roadmap. There were dates, there were names of hospitals, and there was a single sentence written on a yellow index card that made the air leave my lungs. "They do not hate you because you are bad. Addie, they hate you because you are the evidence." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. My entire life, I had internalized their neglect. I thought I was the black sheep, the awkward child who didn't fit their aesthetic of perfection. I thought I was simply not enough. But Rosa was telling me something different. She was telling me that my very existence was a threat they had been managing for 28 years. I looked back at my phone. My father had sent another text. "Please, Addie, let us celebrate you." They did not want to celebrate me. They wanted to contain me. They had seen the number, $5 million a month, and realized that I now had the resources to be dangerous. A poor, rejected daughter is a tragedy. A wealthy, powerful, rejected daughter is a liability. I typed a reply. "I will be there on Saturday." 7 in the evening. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection in the glass looked different than the girl who had cried in the parking lot in Madison. That girl had wanted to be let in. The woman standing here now wanted to burn the house down, brick by brick. I would go to their dinner. I would eat their risotto. I would let them hug me with their stiff, performative arms. But I was not going there to heal old wounds. I was going there to conduct an audit. I picked up the iron key Rosa had left me. It felt cold and heavy in my palm. I used to think they hated me. The truth was far more satisfying. They were terrified of me. Saturday night, I would bring something to that dinner table that would make my mother lose her voice before the appetizers were even served. And that, I decided as I watched the city traffic crawl below, was only the beginning. Most people have childhood memories that feel like warm, hazy light. Mine feel like the damp, gray chill of a rainy Tuesday in Eugene, Oregon. I was 7 years old when my parents packed my life into 2 suitcases and drove me to the airport. They told me it was an opportunity. They said the schools in Oregon were better suited for a child with my specific temperament, whatever that meant. They said Aunt Rosa, who was actually my father's distant cousin and lived on a disability pension, was lonely and needed company, even at 7, sitting in the back seat of their pristine sedan. I knew they were lying. You do not send a 7-year-old across the country because you are worried about her math curriculum. You send her away because she interferes with the aesthetic. My father was a man who treated his reputation like a classic car. He polished it every Sunday, kept it under a tarp, and panicked at the slightest scratch. My mother was the curator of the exhibit. She did not live a life. She performed one. Her world was a series of perfectly lit tableaus designed for public consumption. And then there was me. I was the child who asked the wrong questions at dinner parties. I was the one who did not smile on cue. I was the stain on the rug that they could not scrub out. So they simply moved the furniture to cover me up. The distance created a strange, distorted reality. When I did come home for brief, obligatory visits during holidays, I felt like a visitor in a museum dedicated to someone else. The walls of our house in Charlotte were a shrine to my younger brother. Leo at the state championships, Leo shaking hands with the mayor, Leo smiling with that easy golden boy charm that seemed to convince everyone he was destined for greatness. There were framed certificates, trophies on the mantelpiece, and professional portraits where his skin looked airbrushed. I used to walk the length of that hallway, counting 17 photos of Leo, 2 photos of the dog, and exactly one of me. It was a school portrait from the 5th grade, tucked behind a crystal vase in the corner of the living room, gathering dust, in that picture. My hair was frizzy and my eyes looked startled, as if I had just realized no one was behind the camera to make me smile. That was the only version of me they allowed to exist in their space. Small, distant, and easily obscured. That erasure hurts more than anger. Anger implies passion. Erasure implies that you simply do not matter enough to warrant a reaction. The graduation incident was not a sudden oversight. It was the culmination of a decade of this systematic removal. I had sent the invitations in February. I sent a follow-up email in March with hotel recommendations in Madison. I called in April to confirm the dates. Each time, the response was vague. They were busy. Dad had a merger, Mom had the charity gala, but they never said no. They just let the silence stretch until hope became a foolish thing to hold on to. On the day of the ceremony, while I was standing in that parking lot stripping the cellophane off my gas station flowers, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. My mother had posted a photo. It was not a "sorry we missed it" post. It was a picture of her and her friends in our backyard in Charlotte. The sun was shining. There were crystal flutes of mimosa on the table and a platter of imported cheese. She was wearing a white linen dress and laughing, her head thrown back in effortless joy. The caption read, "Sunday blessed, grateful for moments like these." She was grateful for a brunch while her daughter was walking across a stage 1,000 miles away. I did not cry. By then, I had learned that tears were a waste of hydration. Instead, I did what I would later do professionally. I documented the evidence. I took a screenshot of the post. I captured the timestamp. I saved it to a hidden folder on my phone named Receipts. It was a reflex, a way of proving to myself that I was not crazy, that their neglect was real and quantifiable. 3 days later, my father finally called. I was in my empty apartment, packing boxes, when his name flashed on the screen. I answered, expecting an apology, or perhaps a clumsy excuse about a missed flight. "Did you get the package?" he asked. "No hello, no congratulations." "I did," I said. "The check arrived today." "Good," he said, his voice brisk and businesslike. $500 should cover your moving expenses. We want you to be set up properly." $500. The mimosas in my mother's photo probably cost more than that. "Thank you," I said, my voice flat. "It was a nice ceremony. I wish you could have seen it." There was a pause on the line, a heavy, impatient silence. Then he sighed, the sound of a man dealing with a tedious customer service representative. "Addie, let us not be dramatic," he said. "Everyone graduates. It is a standard milestone, not a moon landing. We are proud. Of course, but let us keep things in perspective. Leo has his SAT prep this weekend, and the stress is very high here." He hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat on the floor of my apartment and stared at the check. It felt like hush money. It was a transaction designed to absolve them of the guilt of their absence. That night, Aunt Rosa took me to a diner on the edge of town. She was the only one who had flown out. She was wearing her Sunday best, a floral dress that smelled of lavender and mothballs, and she ordered us both the most expensive steak on the menu. Even though I knew she would be eating instant oatmeal for the rest of the month to pay for it, she watched me pick at my food for a long time. She saw the screenshot on my phone. She knew about the check. "You are trying to figure out what you did wrong," Rosa said. It was not a question. I looked up at her. "I just wanted them to see me, just once." Rosa reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was rough, calloused from years of scrubbing other people's floors and caring for other people's children. "Listen to me, Adeline," she said, using my full name, making me feel like a person of substance. "You are looking at this backward. You think they leave you out because you are not good enough, but that is not it. Some families do not drop a child because she is bad. They drop her because she makes them look at the things they want to hide. You are the mirror, honey, And they are ugly people who think they are beautiful. Of course they want to break the mirror. She squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. They do not hate you because you are flawed, she whispered, her eyes fierce. They hate you because you expose them. That sentence lodged itself in my chest like a piece of shrapnel. It stayed there for years. I stopped trying to be the daughter they wanted. I stopped sending long updates about my life. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Instead, I leaned into the one thing that had never lied to me: documentation. Paper trails do not gaslight you. Bank statements do not have favorites. Timestamps do not forget to show up. I went into compliance and audit because I found comfort in the cold. Hard binary of numbers, in my world. A thing either balances or it does not. There is no Sunday blessed caption that can hide a deficit in the ledger. I became obsessed with the truth that lives in the fine print. I learned to read a spreadsheet like a diary. I could look at a company's expense report and tell you who was sleeping with whom, who was gambling, and who was terrified of losing their job. So when I say I am going home for dinner, I am not going as the hurt 7-year-old girl who was shipped off to Oregon. I am not going as the graduate who bought her own flowers. I am going as an auditor. I have spent 6 years learning how to spot a fraud. I can smell a shell company from 3 documents away. I can trace a lie through a dozen bank accounts. And now, for the first time in my life, I am turning that lens on the people who created me. My father thinks he is inviting his daughter home to share in her success. He is wrong. He is inviting a forensic investigator to a crime scene, and he has no idea that the crime I am investigating is us, to understand why my family suddenly decided I was worth a phone call. You have to understand the nature of my contract. People hear the number $5 million a month and they assume I won a lottery or inherited a kingdom. They imagine a base salary deposited bi-weekly regardless of performance. That is not how the world of high-stakes compliance works. My arrangement with Sentinel Logic is predatory. But I am the predator. Sentinel builds artificial intelligence systems for the global insurance and reinsurance markets. These are distinct neural networks designed to process claims, assess risk, and pay out settlements in milliseconds. The problem with teaching a machine to handle billions of dollars is that people will always try to teach it to steal. My job is to be the human kill switch. I lead the Red Team, a unit solely dedicated to breaking the system, finding the exploits, and plugging the leaks before a syndicate in Eastern Europe or a rogue trader in Hong Kong drains the liquidity pool. I do not draw a standard paycheck. I negotiated a success fee model. The terms are simple. For every dollar of fraud I identify and prevent, and for every operational inefficiency I eliminate through audit restructuring, I keep 5%. Last month, my team stopped a sophisticated algorithm injection attack that would have cost the firm nearly $100 million. My cut was $5 million. The month before that, it was $3 million. I am not paid for my time. I am paid for my paranoia. I did not start here. I started in the basement of the industry. Metaphorically speaking, I spent 5 years as a junior forensic accountant, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned, looking for the decimal point that was out of place. I worked on fraud cases where the thief was a trusted grandmother in accounts payable or a desperate CFO cooking the books to save a sinking ship. I developed a reputation. They said I had a nose for panic. I could look at a clean ledger and tell you exactly where the bodies were buried because the math was too perfect. Life is messy. Real numbers have jagged edges. When a financial report looks smooth, it is usually a lie. I kept this life entirely separate from the Rivera family brand. My LinkedIn profile was a ghost town. It listed my title as independent consultant and gave no details. I did not post about my wins. I did not buy flashy cars. I lived in a secure building, drove a Volvo, and banked my checks. Then Sentinel Logic decided they needed a public relations win. To secure a massive government contract, they needed to prove their commitment to transparency. They issued a press release announcing their new Head of Global Compliance and Risk Integrity. They plastered my name on the wire services. They touted my track record. They wanted the market to know that Addie Rivera, the woman who never missed a rounding error, was watching the door. That press release was the signal flare. My family did not read the trade journals, but their wealth managers did. Their friends in the country club did. Someone, somewhere, set a Google alert for the name Rivera. And suddenly, the daughter who was doing okay in Oregon was revealed to be a financial titan. I was not just wealthy to them, I was something far more valuable. I was a clean asset. In their world, money is common, but a reputation for unassailable integrity? That is rare. That is a shield. The calls started coming in a coordinated wave. First, it was my mother. "Addie, honey," she said, her voice dripping with a pride that felt like syrup over a razor blade. "We saw the announcement. We always knew you were destined for this. You are our brilliant girl." Then my father, "It has been too long. A family should not be apart when there is so much to celebrate. We need to reunite. The house feels empty without you." Then Leo, "My golden brother. Come home, sis. Seriously. I miss you. It is weird without you here." I sat in my office, listening to these voicemails on a loop, dissecting them like a fraudulent invoice. I remembered the last time my mother called me honey. I was 16. She wanted me to take the blame for a dent in the fender of her Mercedes so her insurance premiums would not go up. She had smiled just like that, touched my cheek, and said, "It is better if you say you did it. You do not drive anyway." I remembered the last time my father talked about family unity. It was when he needed my signature to release a trust fund portion that legally belonged to me, so he could leverage it for a real estate deal. I remembered Leo's last, "I miss you." He needed help with a college essay he was too hungover to write. Every kindness in the Rivera house came with an invoice attached. They were not calling because they missed me. They were calling because they had identified a resource. They were circling. I thought about Aunt Rosa, 2 weeks before she died. She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman fading away. "Listen to me," she had rasped. "They are going to come back, not when you are down, when you are up. They will come back when they need a name that has not been dirtied. Do not let them use your soap to wash their hands." I looked at the calendar. The dinner was set for Saturday. I could have said no. I could have blocked their numbers and continued my life of lucrative isolation, but the auditor in me was curious. What was the specific nature of their desperation? You do not love bomb a discarded daughter unless the alternative is catastrophe. They needed me, and if they needed me, that meant they were vulnerable. I decided to treat the dinner exactly like a site visit. I opened a new file on my laptop labeled Rivera Audit. I started making notes. I listed their recent public appearances. I cross-referenced my father's business filings. I looked at the charitable foundations my mother sat on. I prepared my mindset. I was not going as a daughter seeking approval. I was going as an investigator seeking the point of failure. I packed my bag for the trip. I did not pack nostalgic items. I packed a digital voice recorder. I packed a secondary encrypted hard drive. And I packed the envelope Rosa had left me, sliding it into the inside pocket of my blazer like a weapon. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the collar of my silk blouse. It was expensive, but understated. No logos, just quality. The kind of clothes that whisper power rather than scream it. "Okay, Addie," I said to the empty room. "Let us go see what they are hiding." I was walking into a trap. I knew that, but they did not realize that I was bringing the cage with me. They saw a daughter returning to the fold. I saw a set of books that needed to be balanced, and I had a feeling the debt was going to be substantial. The check they sent me for graduation was $500. The bill I was coming to collect would be considerably higher. Charlotte, North Carolina, welcomed me with a wall of humidity that felt like a wet wool blanket draped over my shoulders. The air smelled of magnolia and old money, a scent I associated with Sunday mornings when my parents would dress up for church to pray for prosperity while ignoring the daughter sitting in the back pew. I drove a rental car, a nondescript sedan that vanished into traffic, up the winding driveway of my parents' home. The house was a sprawling colonial revival that looked like it had been plucked from a magazine spread about Southern living. The bricks were whitewashed, the shutters were a tasteful charcoal, and the lawn was manicured to within a millimeter of its life. To the casual observer, it screamed stability, but I was not a casual observer, I was an auditor. As I walked up the path, I noticed the details that wealth hides, but debt exposes. The slate roof had a few tiles that did not quite match, suggesting a cheap repair job rather than a full restoration. The luxury SUV in the driveway had a temporary dealer tag that had been expired for 2 weeks. The landscaping was lush in the front, but thinned out aggressively near the property line where the neighbors would not see. This was not the home of a family comfortably resting on their assets. This was a stage set built on credit. It was beautiful in the way a movie set is beautiful, perfect from the front, held together with plywood and prayers from the back. I rang the doorbell. It opened before my finger left the button. My mother stood there, framed by the soft, warm light of the foyer chandelier. She looked older, her neck slightly looser, her eyes lined with a tension that makeup could not quite conceal. "Addie!" she cried out. Launching herself at me, the hug was suffocating. It lasted 5 seconds too long. It was the kind of embrace you give someone when you are trying to pick their pocket or check for a wire. I stood stiffly, my arms at my sides, letting her perform affection on my body. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet, but the tears did not track through her foundation. They pooled just enough to catch the light. "Look at you," she said, her voice trembling. "So professional, so grown up." "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was calm, flat, and entirely devoid of the warmth she was projecting. My father appeared behind her. He did not hug me. He extended a hand, gripping mine firmly, shaking it twice. It was the handshake of a man closing a deal, not a father greeting his child. "Adeline," he said, using the full name he only used when he wanted to sound authoritative. "Welcome home. We are glad you could make time in your schedule." "I made time," I said, stepping inside. "And look who is here," my mother chirped, gesturing to the living room. Leo stood by the fireplace. He was holding a glass of scotch that looked too big for his hand. He was 25 now, with the soft, undefined jawline of someone who has never had to chew through a tough situation. He flashed a smile that was too wide, too bright, and entirely terrified. "Hey, sis," he said, raising the glass. "Long time. You look expensive." "You look tired." "Leo," I replied, walking past him to the dining room. The dinner was a masterclass in tension disguised as hospitality. They served sea bass on china I recognized from my childhood. The good set they only brought out for the bank manager or the bishop. The conversation was a carefully curated minefield. They asked about my flight. They asked about the weather in Chicago. They complimented my earrings. They did everything except ask me who I actually was. Then, the script began. "You know," my mother said, placing her fork down with deliberate grace, "we have been doing a lot of thinking lately, about legacy, about what matters." "Family matters," my father said, nodding gravely. "We realized we let drift happen, and that is on us. But seeing your success, Addie, it reminded us of the potential in this bloodline. You deserve to be part of this," Leo added, reciting his line a little too quickly. "You deserve to be loved and included." I took a sip of water. It was cool and clean. "Included in what, exactly?" My father cleared his throat. He reached under the table and produced a leather-bound folder. He slid it across the white tablecloth. It stopped exactly 3 inches from my plate. "The Rivera Renewal Fund," he announced. I opened the folder. It was a pitch deck, glossy paper, high-resolution stock photos of smiling, diverse children, bold typography. The mission statement was vague but noble. It spoke of empowering underprivileged youth, providing scholarships, and honoring the family tradition of community service. "We want to launch this foundation," my father explained, his voice taking on the cadence of a salesman, "to to give back, but to make it work, to really make a splash in the media and attract the big donors. We need a face that screams integrity, a face that screams success. Your face, my mother whispered, leaning in. We want you on the board, my father continued. Supervisory capacity. You would be the guarantor of our legitimacy, and, of course, to kick things off, to show the world we are serious. You need a seed donation. I finished the sentence for him. A foundational contribution, he corrected. To create momentum. I looked down at the documents. I flipped past the photos of the smiling children and went straight to the budget breakdown on page 12. My eyes scanned the columns. I did not need a calculator. The math screamed at me. Administrative fees were set at 20%. The industry standard was less than 10%. There was a line item for strategic consulting payable to a firm called Apex Solutions, LLC. I had never heard of them, and for a local charity, the retainer was 6 figures a month. And then, there was the organizational chart. Executive Director, Leo Rivera. I looked at the salary proposed for the Executive Director. It was $200,000 a year, for a startup charity with 0 assets. Leo is running it? I asked, keeping my face neutral. He has great vision, my mother said quickly. He connects with the youth. And Apex Solutions? I asked. Who are they? A local firm, my father said, waving his hand dismissively. Friends of the family, good people. They handle the branding. I looked at the branding budget. It was enough to fund a senatorial campaign, not a scholarship fund. This was not a charity. This was a salary vehicle for my unemployable brother and a tax shelter for my parents. Funded by my money and laundered through my reputation, they wanted me to write a check for $500,000 to start it, and then use my name to solicit millions more from their wealthy friends, all while skimming the top for admin and consulting. It is a lot of money, I said, closing the folder. And the structure seems top-heavy. My mother's face hardened instantly. The sweet, weeping mother vanished, replaced by the woman who used to lock me in my room when I didn't fold the towels correctly. Addie, she said, her voice sharp, do you not want to do good? Are you really going to hoard all that money while children in our community suffer? We are offering you a chance to be a hero, to be part of the family legacy. It is a standard structure, my father insisted, his jaw tight. We need to pay for talent. Leo is talent. Leo looked down at his plate. Unable to meet my eyes, he knew. He knew exactly what this was. He was the golden boy who had failed to launch, and now they were building him a rocket ship out of my bank account. I looked at them, the 3 of them, united in their greed, terrified of their own irrelevance. They thought they were trapping me. They thought guilt was a lever they could pull to open my wallet. They had no idea that I audited sophisticated artificial intelligence for a living. I hunted ghosts in the machine. And I was looking at 3 very amateur ghosts. If I said no, they would spin it. They would tell everyone I was cold, selfish, a miser who turned her back on dying children. They would ruin my reputation before I could even defend it. But if I said yes, I would have access. I would be on the board. I would have legal standing to demand receipts. I would have the power to approve or deny every single invoice. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It did not reach my eyes. You are right, I said softly. Family is important, and helping children is a noble cause. My mother exhaled, a sound of pure relief. My father sat back, looking smug. I will do it, I said. I will provide the seed money, and I will serve on the supervisory board. That is wonderful, my mother cried, reaching for her wineglass. Oh, Addie, I knew you had a heart. However, I added, holding up a finger, as a compliance officer, I have fiduciary duties. I will need to review the bylaws and the vendor contracts before the wire transfer, just a formality, to protect us all. Of course, my father said, dismissing the threat. He thought review meant glancing at a paper. He did not know that for me. Review meant an autopsy. I tapped the leather folder. I will take this to my hotel, I said. I will have my lawyer look at the incorporation papers on Monday. If everything is clean, you will have your money by Friday. It is clean, Leo blurted out. It is totally clean. I am sure it is, I said. I looked at my mother. Pass the risotto, please. I am starving. I ate their food. I drank their wine. I listened to their plans for the gala launch party. And all the while, I was mentally drafting the subpoena requests I would need in 3 months. They wanted my name on the dotted line. They were going to get it, but they forgot that when you invite an auditor to the table, you do not just get a signature. You get an inspection, and I was going to inspect this family until the foundation cracked. I closed the door to the guest bedroom of my parents' house and turned the lock. The heavy click of the deadbolt was the only sound in the hallway, to them. I was the prodigal daughter retiring for the evening after a heartwarming family reunion. To me, I was a field agent establishing a secure base of operations. I sat at the antique writing desk, opened my laptop, and connected to my secure hotspot. I did not trust their Wi-Fi. A family that lives on credit usually has weak firewalls, but more importantly, I did not want my digital footprint on their router. I created a new encrypted folder on my desktop. I did not name it Family. I named it project_red_mirror. This is the part of the job I usually enjoy. It is the puzzle phase. It is the moment when you take the chaotic, messy narrative a client has fed you and overlay it with the cold, hard geometry of facts. I started with the vendor list my father had carelessly included in the Rivera Renewal Fund pitch deck. The first entity was a company called Apex Solutions, listed as the primary contractor for branding and strategic outreach. They were billing $12,000 a month for initial market penetration. I pulled up the North Carolina Secretary of State database. I typed in the name. The search wheel spun for 2 seconds and spat out a result. Apex Solutions had been incorporated exactly 3 weeks ago. The registered agent was a generic legal service in Delaware, a classic move to obscure ownership, but the principal office address was local. I copied the address into Google Maps and switched to Street View. I zoomed in on Suite 204. It was not a glass-walled office building. It was a UPS store in a strip mall, sandwiched between a discount vape shop and a dry cleaner. Suite 204 was a mailbox. My parents were paying $12,000 a month to a metal box that smelled of cardboard and regret. I moved to the next name, Vance Consulting. They were listed for community liaison services at $8,000 a month. The name sounded familiar. I cross-referenced it with my mother's social media friends list. It took me 4 minutes to find her. Patricia Vance, my mother's tennis partner. Her profile picture showed her holding a glass of Chardonnay on a boat. Her professional headline read, Interior Design Enthusiast. There was no mention of nonprofit management or community outreach. Yet, she was ostensibly being paid a corporate executive's salary to liaise with the community. I took screenshots of everything: the UPS store, the incorporation date, Patricia's LinkedIn profile. I saved them as PDFs, time-stamped and hashtagged for chain of custody. Next, I opened my email and drafted a message to Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a civil litigator I had worked with on a previous case involving a charity scam in Miami. He was expensive, cynical, and hated fraud even more than I did. Marcus, I wrote, I need a structural review of a new 501c3 based in Charlotte. I suspect shell vendors and conflict of interest. I also need you to recommend a forensic accountant who can act as an independent auditor without raising alarms. I am the target mark. Let us discuss retainers on Monday. I hit send, then I laid the trap. The next morning over breakfast, I played the part of the cautious but supportive investor. My mother was making pancakes, a performance of domestic bliss that felt manic. My father was reading the business section of the newspaper, pretending he wasn't waiting for me to speak. I have reviewed the initial proposal, I said, stirring almond milk into my coffee. They both froze. And? My father asked, putting the paper down. It is ambitious, I said. But as a compliance officer, I cannot release the full $500,000 of seed funding without seeing operational milestones. It is a tax issue. If the IRS sees a lump sum transfer to a non-operational entity, it triggers an audit. I watched them flinch at the word audit. So, I continued, buttering a piece of toast, I am willing to authorize an initial tranche of $50,000. This will cover your filing fees and the first month of vendor costs. Once I see the invoices and the work product from Apex Solutions and Vance Consulting, I will release the next $50,000. We will do it in stages. I waited for the pushback. In a legitimate business, a CEO would argue that they needed capital for liquidity, but my father smiled. It was a wide, relieved smile. That sounds very sensible, Addie, he said. Very professional. We can work with that. Yes, my mother chimed in, flipping a pancake with unnecessary vigor. Slow and steady, that is the smart way. They agreed too quickly. If they were actually trying to launch a massive foundation, $50,000 would barely cover the deposit on a venue. The fact that they accepted the smaller amount without a fight told me two things. First, they were desperate for any cash they could get their hands on immediately. Second, they were confident they could fake the invoices to unlock the rest. They thought they could manufacture enough paperwork to fool me. They thought I was just a daughter with a checkbook, not a shark in the water. Later that afternoon, I told them I was going upstairs to take a nap. I walked loudly up the wooden stairs, opened my bedroom door, and then closed it with a firm slam. Then I took off my shoes and crept back to the top of the landing. The acoustics in the house were excellent. The high ceilings in the foyer acted as a natural amplifier for voices in the kitchen. It is $50,000. Tom, my mother's voice hissed. That is enough to pay off the bridge loan. We can stall the rest. She is being difficult. Leo's voice joined in. He sounded petulant. Did you hear her asking about the milestones? She's going to want to see everything. She's going to look at the metadata. Dad, she does that for a living. Relax, my father said. His voice was lower, more dismissive. She is an auditor for AI systems, not a private investigator. She looks for patterns in code, not receipts for catering. We just need to make the paperwork look professional. Print everything on thick paper. Use the letterhead. I do not like it, Leo muttered. She looks at me like she is scanning a barcode. Just string her along for 3 months, my mother said. Once her name is on the website as the supervisory director, we can go to the Millingtons and the Carters. We can say, look, our daughter, the risk expert, trusts this fund. They will write checks without asking a single question. We just need her name to clear the path. I stepped back from the railing, my heart beating in a slow, cold rhythm. It was not just about the money. It was about the money, but that was just the mechanism. The real commodity they were stealing was my credibility. They knew their own reputation was shot. They knew they were viewed as social climbers living on borrowed time. They needed Addie Rivera, the $5 million a month compliance officer, to wash their sins clean. They wanted to wear my integrity like a costume so they could rob their friends. I retreated to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope Aunt Rosa had left me. I had opened it in Chicago, but I had been too overwhelmed to process the contents. Now, in the house where I grew up, the house that felt more like a film set than a home, I felt ready. I slid the papers out. There was a stack of medical records. There was a copy of a birth certificate that looked different from the one I had used to get my passport. And there was a handwritten note from Rosa. I read the first line again. You are not who they think you are. I stopped. My hand hovered over the next paragraph. The fraud investigation downstairs was black and white. It was numbers, shell companies, and lies I could prove in court. But what was in this envelope was different. This was existential. If I read the next line, I could never unread it. If I turned this page, the history of my life would be rewritten. I looked at the door. I could hear my mother laughing downstairs, a sharp, brittle sound. I put the letter back in the envelope and tucked it under my pillow. Not yet. First, I would nail them on the financial fraud. I would let them take the $50,000. I would let them create their fake invoices. I would let them dig the hole so deep they could never climb out. And when they were standing at the bottom, waiting for me to throw down a rope, that is when I would read the rest of the letter. I opened my laptop again. I typed an email to my bank, authorizing the wire transfer of $50,000 to the Rivera Renewal Fund. Subject: Seed Funding. Tranche 1. Message: Proceed with transaction. Flag account for monitoring. I hit send. The bait was in the water. Now, I just had to wait for them to bite. The $50,000 wire transfer was the bait, but I needed to understand the trap before I could spring it. I left my parents' house under the pretense of meeting a client for coffee. Instead, I drove 20 minutes south to a climate-controlled storage facility near the airport. This was where I kept the physical archive of the only person who had ever actually cared about me. When Aunt Rosa died, I did not just inherit her key and her advice, I inherited her filing cabinets. Rosa was a woman who believed that if you did not write something down, it did not happen. She kept receipts from grocery runs in 1999. She kept every birthday card I ever sent her, and, as I was about to discover, she kept the secrets my parents thought they had buried in a landfill. I punched in my access code and rolled up the metal door. The unit smelled of dust and the lavender sachets Rosa used to sew into her coat pockets. I sat on a plastic crate and opened the heavy banker's box labeled Rivera Personal. I sifted through the layers of my childhood. There were report cards my parents had never signed. There were drawings of houses with 4 stick figures that I had made in kindergarten, where the smallest figure was always standing slightly apart from the others. Then, at the bottom of the stack, I found a manila envelope taped shut with masking tape. Inside was a photograph, a photocopy of a document, and a small, spiral-bound notebook. I picked up the photograph first. It was a Polaroid. The colors faded to a yellowish-orange hue. It showed my mother, but not the brittle, frozen socialite I had just eaten dinner with. This woman was young, perhaps 24. Her hair was windblown, her skin was tanned, and she was laughing with a genuine, unguarded joy I had never seen directed at my father. She was not alone in the photo. She was standing next to a man. He was tall, with dark eyes and a jawline that looked cut from granite. He had a protective arm around her shoulders, and she was leaning into him as if he were the only solid thing in the world. I looked at the man's face. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the selfie camera. I looked at my own face, the arch of the eyebrow, the shape of the nose. I felt a cold shiver walk down my spine. I was not looking at a stranger. I was looking at the source code. I set the photo down and picked up the notebook. Rosa's handwriting was cramped and hurried. On the first page, there was a single entry dated 28 years ago. Savannah, Georgia, Memorial Health University Medical Center. Dr. Evans. Birth records altered. Payment made in cash. Savannah. I had never been to Savannah. My parents always told me I was born in Charlotte during a snowstorm. It was part of their lore. "You came early," my mother used to say. "You were always inconvenient." I closed my eyes, and a memory I had suppressed for 2 decades clawed its way to the surface. I was 6 years old. I was sitting at my mother's vanity table, watching her apply night cream. I had been studying her reflection, trying to find myself in it. "Mommy," I had asked, "why is my hair curly and yours is straight? Why are my eyes almost black and yours are blue?" I expected a science lesson. Instead, I got an explosion. She had spun around, her face drained of color, her eyes wide with a panic that looked terrifyingly like rage. She grabbed my shoulders, her fingernails digging into my skin through my pajamas. "You are a Rivera," she had hissed, her voice trembling. "Do not ever ask me that again. Do not ever let your father hear you say that. You look like us because you are us. Stop looking for trouble." She had sent me to bed without a story. I remembered crying into my pillow, confused by her terror. Now, looking at the note about Savannah and altered records, the terror made sense. She wasn't afraid of a child's curiosity. She was afraid of a breach of contract. I turned back to the box. I realized then why Rosa had known where to look. Rosa had not just been a housewife. Before she took me in, she had worked for 30 years in medical administration. She was a billing coder. She knew how hospitals buried mistakes. She knew that there is no such thing as a deleted file, only a misplaced one. I needed to verify this. I pulled out my laptop, tethered it to my phone, and logged into a secure messaging app. I typed a message to a contact I had not spoken to in 2 years. Her name was Evelyn, a former colleague of Rosa's who now ran a legitimate skip tracing and genealogy service in Atlanta. Evelyn, this is Addie. I need a procedural consult. I'm looking for a sealed birth record from Chatham County, Georgia, circa 28 years ago. I do not need you to break the law. I need you to tell me which forms to file to petition for an unsealing order based on suspected clerical error. I am the subject of the record. I hit send. Then I opened a browser tab and ordered a legal-grade DNA test kit. I did not order the commercial ones that give you a pie chart of your ethnicity and sell your data to pharmaceutical companies. I ordered a chain of custody kit, the kind used in paternity suits and inheritance disputes. I arranged for a mobile phlebotomist to meet me at my hotel the next morning. I was not doing this for emotional closure. I was doing this for leverage. If my parents had lied about my origins, that was a family tragedy. But if they had falsified a birth certificate to cover up a scandal, that was a felony. And if they had used that falsified document to secure trust funds, insurance policies, or social standing, that was fraud. My mother asked me if I wanted to do good. She asked me to be the face of her foundation. She had no idea that the face she wanted to use might not legally belong to the name she gave it. I was about to close the laptop when a notification chimed. It was an email. It was not from Evelyn. It was from a sender I did not recognize. The domain name belonged to a boutique law firm in Savannah, Georgia. I opened it. The subject line read, Inquiry regarding the estate of Julian Vance. I froze. Vance, the same last name as the consultant my mother was funneling money to through the fake charity. Patricia Vance. Was this her husband? Her brother? The body of the email was brief and terrifyingly professional. Ms. Rivera. Our system flagged a recent credit inquiry and background check initiated by you regarding the corporate entity Vance Consulting. Please be advised that our firm holds a sealed file regarding a custodial agreement dated 28 years ago involving the Vance family and a party identified as the Rivera estate. We are under strict instructions to release this file only upon biometric verification of the beneficiary's identity. If you are the Adeline Rivera listed in the original covenant, please contact us to arrange for secure transmission. I stared at the screen. The air in the storage unit felt suddenly thin. They had a file. A custodial agreement. You do not have a custodial agreement for a natural-born child. You have a custodial agreement for an asset you have acquired. My parents were not just laundering money through the new charity. They were paying hush money, and they had been paying it for a very long time. I packed the photo and the notebook into my bag. I locked the storage unit. I walked back to my car, the gravel crunching loudly under my boots. I had come to Charlotte to audit a $50,000 theft. I was leaving with a lead on a 28-year-old conspiracy. My parents thought they were playing a game of social chess. They did not realize the board had just expanded, and I was the only one who could see the new pieces. The secure file from the Savannah law firm finished downloading on my laptop screen. It was not a large file, only 12 pages of scanned legalese, but it carried the weight of a tombstone. I sat in my hotel room, the blackout curtains drawn against the bright North Carolina morning, and opened the document. The header read, Deed of Private Settlement and Guardianship Transfer. The date was 28 years ago, 3 months before I was born, or rather, 3 months before the date on my birth certificate. I had spent my life imagining tragic, romantic reasons for my isolation. I had pictured secret affairs, star-crossed lovers, or perhaps a teenage mistake my parents were too proud to acknowledge. I had romanticized my own trauma. But as I read the dry, dense paragraphs of the legal agreement, I realized the truth was far colder. There was no romance here. There was only a balance sheet. I was not a love child. I was a collateral asset in a financial cover-up. The documents outlined a crisis that had threatened the Rivera family nearly 3 decades ago. My father had been on the verge of his first major corporate promotion, a position that required an impeccable background check. At the same time, a younger female relative, identified in the papers as Patricia Vance, had become pregnant amidst a scandal involving misappropriated funds from a community ledger she was managing. If Patricia's pregnancy and the theft had come to light simultaneously, the resulting investigation would have torched the entire family's reputation and destroyed my father's career before it began. So, they made a deal, a trade. My mother, a woman obsessed with appearances but struggling with fertility issues at the time, agreed to take the child. They staged a pregnancy. They sent Patricia away to study abroad, which was actually a confinement home in Savannah, when I was born. I was quietly handed over, my birth certificate falsified to list the Rivera couple as my natural parents. In exchange, the family paid off Patricia's debts, buried the embezzlement evidence, and she agreed to vanish into the background. I sat back, the air conditioning humming in the silence. This explained everything. It explained why my mother looked at me with that peculiar mix of resentment and fear. She did not hate me because I was rebellious. She hated me because I was a living, breathing receipt for a crime she had committed 28 years ago. Every time she looked at my face, she didn't see a daughter. She saw the blackmail material she had been managing for decades. It also explained the sudden appearance of Vance Consulting on the charity's vendor list. Patricia Vance had returned. The consulting fees, of $8,000 a month, were not for community outreach. They were hush money. My biological mother was leveraging the old secret to siphon cash from the new charity, and my parents were paying her to keep the skeleton in the closet. And then there was Leo. I thought about my brother, the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. 2 years after they acquired me, my mother had miraculously conceived naturally. Leo was their blood. Leo was the child they actually wanted, the one who didn't come with legal baggage or the stench of a covered-up crime. He was the legitimate heir. I was just the placeholder they were stuck with, the stopgap measure that never left. My phone buzzed. It was the notification from the secure lab where I had sent my DNA sample the day before. I opened the app. The interface was clean, clinical, and devastating. Maternal probability. With reference sample. A. Mother. 0%. Genetic linkage. Found. Second-degree relative match with database. IDV 4492. Vance lineage. The science confirmed the paperwork. I was a Vance. The woman I called mother was essentially a contractual guardian who had regretted the purchase the moment her real son was born. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. The confusing, painful puzzle of my childhood finally had all its pieces. The coldness, the exclusion from photos, the way they forgot my graduation. It wasn't personal neglect. It was inventory management. You don't celebrate the acquisition of a liability. You tolerate it. Aunt Rosa had known. She must have been the one who facilitated the medical logistics in Savannah. That was why she had been exiled to Oregon. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had held the shovel, and she had left me this envelope not to break my heart, but to give me the weapon I needed to survive them. I stood up and paced the small hotel room. My instinct, the hurt child inside me, wanted to scream. I wanted to drive back to that house, throw the papers on the dining table, and watch their faces crumble. I wanted to shout, "I know who I am. I know what you bought." But the auditor in me slammed the brakes. If I revealed this now, without context, I would lose. They would spin it. They would say I was having a mental breakdown. They would say I was delusional, that the papers were forgeries, that I was a greedy daughter trying to cut her brother out of his inheritance by inventing a scandal. They had the social capital. I was just the outsider. I needed to be smarter. I needed a double bind. The DNA and the identity theft were powerful, but they were emotional crimes. in the eyes of the law. A falsified birth certificate from 28 years ago might be past the statute of limitations. But the charity fraud? The wire fraud? The tax evasion happening right now with the Rivera Renewal Fund? That was fresh. That was actionable. I realized my strategy had to be precise. I could not use the identity reveal as the opening move. I had to use it as the kill shot. I needed to let them execute the financial crime first. I needed to let them cash my $50,000 check. I needed them to generate the fake invoices from Vance Consulting. Once I had the financial paper trail proving they were laundering money to Patricia Vance, I could layer the identity reveal on top of it. "Why are you paying this woman $8,000 a month?" I would ask. "Because she is a consultant." They would lie. "No," I would reply, dropping the DNA test on the table. "You are paying her because she is my mother, and this is the price of her silence." That was the checkmate. It tied the past crime to the present crime. It made the motive for the embezzlement undeniable. I sat back down at the computer and opened a new encrypted file. I labeled it motive. I dragged the PDF of the Savannah Agreement into the folder. Then I dragged the DNA results in next to it. My father thought he was playing a game of reputation management. He thought he could use my clean name to wash his dirty money. He didn't realize that the name he gave me was the dirtiest thing he owned. I checked my watch. It was time for the family lunch they had insisted on. I would have to go there, sit across from the woman who bought me and the man who brokered the deal, and pretend I was still their dutiful, oblivious daughter. I would have to smile at Leo, the brother who replaced me. I checked my reflection in the mirror. My face was calm. My eyes were dry. "Showtime, Addie," I whispered. I grabbed my bag, making sure the digital recorder was fully charged. I was not going to lunch to eat. I was going to record the sound of them digging their own graves, and for the first time in my life. I knew exactly who was holding the shovel. It was me. The attack did not come with a scream. It came with a ping. I was sitting in my hotel room, organizing the digital evidence of the $50,000 wire transfer, when my phone lit up with a Google alert. It was a link to a local business blog in Charlotte, a pay-to-play outlet that often ran puff pieces for local real estate developers. But this was not a puff piece. The headline read, "Internal Strife Threatens Launch of Rivera Renewal Fund." I clicked the link. The article was a masterpiece of vague insinuation. It cited sources close to the family, claiming that the foundation's launch was being delayed by unexpected demands from a family member who had been struggling with personal stability issues. It painted a picture of a benevolent family trying to do good while being held hostage by an estranged, volatile daughter who had suddenly reappeared to demand control. It did not name me directly, but it did everything except print my social security number. It mentioned a compliance professional with a history of obsessive behavior. My stomach turned over. They were not just trying to steal my money anymore. They were trying to discredit the witness before she could take the stand. 10 minutes later, the real damage arrived. My laptop chimed with an incoming video call request from the chief legal officer at Sentinel Logic. My heart hammered against my ribs. I accepted the call. "Addie," he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "We have a problem. We received an anonymous tip this morning regarding a potential conflict of interest and reputational liability involving your family's charitable activities. They are suggesting you are using your position here to leverage personal disputes." "That is a lie," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I am conducting due diligence on a seed donation. That is all." "I believe you," he said, sighing. "But until this clears up, we have to pause your access to the Level 5 sensitive data. We cannot have a compliance officer who is the subject of compliance rumors. We are freezing the contract for 7 days. Fix this, Addie, or we have to sever." The screen went black. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the darkened monitor. They had gone for the jugular. They knew my career was my armor, so they decided to strip it off. Then the personal barrage began. My mother sent a text message. "Addie, please stop this. You are destroying the family. Why are you so angry? We just want to help people. Please do not make us release the medical history. The threat was veiled but clear. She was threatening to tell the world I was unstable, or perhaps hint at the adoption scandal in a way that made me look like the villain. My father sent a PDF attachment. It was a cease and desist letter from a lawyer I knew was his golf buddy. It accused me of harassment and tortious interference with the Foundation's business. It was legally baseless, intended to scare a layperson, but I was not a layperson. Then came the final blow. Leo posted a video on his Instagram story. He was sitting in his car, looking disheveled and teary-eyed. "Hey guys," he said to the camera, his voice cracking. "Just having a hard week. It is tough when you look up to someone your whole life. And then money changes them. My sister, man. I love her. But she is obsessed with control. It breaks my heart to see her attack mom and dad like this." The comments section was already filling up with heart emojis and messages like, "Stay strong, Leo," and "Money reveals character." I put the phone down. I did not cry. I did not throw the lamp against the wall. Instead, I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. They wanted a street fight. They wanted me to get emotional, to post a rant, to scream at them in public so they could point and say, "See, she is crazy." I would not give them that satisfaction. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder titled Countermeasures. I did not respond to the texts. I did not comment on the video. Instead, I responded with logs. I pulled the transaction history for the $50,000 I had wired. It had landed in the Foundation's account on Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, $20,000 had been transferred to Apex Solutions. By Wednesday afternoon, $10,000 had gone to Vance Consulting. I traced the routing number for Apex Solutions. It matched a bank branch inside a supermarket 3 miles from my parents' house. I traced the routing number for Vance Consulting. It matched a personal checking account in Savannah, Georgia. I compiled the data into a single, sterile PDF. I included the email headers from my father's lawyer, noting the timestamp that proved they planned the legal threat before I had even refused the funding. I included the metadata from Leo's video, showing he had recorded 3 takes before posting the sad one. Then I drafted a formal demand letter. To the Board of Directors of the Rivera Renewal Fund. Pursuant to my rights as a founding donor and supervisory director, I hereby demand an emergency board meeting to review the following irregularities. 1. Unauthorized disbursements to unvetted vendors. 2. Lack of competitive bidding for Apex Solutions. 3. Failure to disclose familial conflicts of interest regarding Vance Consulting. I further demand an immediate freeze on all remaining funds and the appointment of an independent external auditor. Failure to comply within 48 hours will result in a referral to the Internal Revenue Service and the State Attorney General's Charities Division. I fired it off. They tried to dodge. My father replied an hour later, claiming the website was under maintenance and they could not access the logs. My mother emailed to say they were too emotionally distraught to meet. They deleted the smear article from the local blog, likely realizing they had poked the bear too hard. But I did not let up. I sent a follow-up email every hour, on the hour, copying their personal lawyer. Finally, at 10 o'clock at night, my father caved. "Fine," he wrote, "we will meet, Friday at noon. At the house, we will show you everything. You are being paranoid, but we will humor you." They thought they could handle me in person. They thought that once I was in their living room, surrounded by their furniture and their guilt trips, I would fold. I spent the rest of the night preparing for the meeting. I downloaded every document they had uploaded to the shared drive they had hastily created to appease me. I read every line of the bylaws. I checked every signature. And then, at 3 a.m, I found it. It was a document titled Conflict of Interest Disclosure Form. It was required by state law for all nonprofit officers. Leo had signed it as the executive director. In the section asking, "Do you have any financial interest in any vendors contracted by the Foundation?" He had checked the box marked No. But underneath that, in the vendor verification file, there was a contract for Apex Solutions. The signature on the contract for Apex was an illegible scrawl. But the notary stamp was clear. The notary was a woman named Sarah Jenkins. I ran a search on Sarah Jenkins. She was Leo's girlfriend. But that was not the smoking gun. The smoking gun was the date. The contract between the Foundation and Apex Solutions was dated May 1st. The articles of incorporation for the Foundation were filed on May 15th. They had signed a contract with themselves 2 weeks before the entity legally existed. They had attached a fake document to justify the wire transfer of my money. In the eyes of the law, that was not just mismanagement, that was wire fraud. And because they had uploaded it to a server to show me, they had just transmitted evidence of that fraud across state lines. I sat back in my chair. The fatigue vanished. They had tried to paint me as the villain. They had tried to destroy my career. But in their arrogance, in their rush to cover their tracks and create a paper trail to shut me up, they had handed me the keys to the cell they were building for themselves. I saved the file. I backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. "I will see you on Friday," I whispered to the screen. I closed my laptop. The smear campaign had hurt. Yes, but pain is just data, and I had just finished processing it. Now, it was time to generate the report. My hotel room had become a war room. The bed was covered in stacks of paper, each one a different color-coded aspect of the impending demolition of the Rivera family name. Marcus Thorne, the civil litigator I had retained, sat in the armchair near the window. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of expensive mahogany and skepticism. He held the flowchart I had created, tracing the flow of funds from my bank account to the shell companies. "It is a classic double bind," Marcus said, tapping the paper with a gold pen. "That is the beauty of it, Addie. If they admit they knew Apex Solutions was a shell company, they are confessing to wire fraud and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. If they claim they did not know, then as officers of the Foundation, they are admitting to gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. Either way, they lose control of the entity." "And the money?" I asked, pacing the narrow strip of carpet between the bed and the desk. "If it is fraud, we claw it back through civil asset forfeiture," Marcus replied. "If it is negligence, we sue the directors personally for damages, meaning we take the house." I nodded. This was the strategy. We were not going to walk into that meeting screaming about betrayal. We were going to walk in with a scalpel. I glanced at the sealed envelope from Aunt Rosa, which sat on the nightstand next to my encrypted hard drive. The DNA results and the adoption papers were my nuclear option. Marcus did not know about them yet. I was keeping that card up my sleeve. The financial crimes were enough to destroy their business. The identity secret was only to be used if they tried to pivot the narrative, if they tried to paint me as a mentally unstable daughter making up stories to hurt her loving parents. If they played the crazy woman card, I would play the purchased child card. "What about the brother?" Marcus asked, looking at the dossier on Leo. I stopped pacing. I pulled up the timeline I had constructed on my laptop. It was a side-by-side comparison of Leo's social media activity and the Foundation's bank logs. "Leo is the tragedy," I said quietly. "Look at this." I pointed to a timestamp. On May 3rd at 2 in the afternoon, the Foundation's account transferred $5,000 to a personal account linked to Sarah Jenkins. The notary, who was also Leo's girlfriend, at 2:15 that same afternoon, Leo posted a selfie on Instagram with the caption, "Grinding for the community, big things coming, blessed." "He thinks he is a CEO," I said. "But look at who signed the transfer authorization. It wasn't Leo." Marcus squinted at the screen. "That is your father's signature." "Exactly," I said. "They made Leo the executive director on paper so his name is on the tax forms. They made him the face of the operation, but my father holds the checkbook. They are setting him up. Marcus, if the IRS comes knocking, Leo is the one who goes to prison for signing the fraudulent conflict of interest forms. My parents stay clean." It was a level of cruelty that made my stomach turn. They were willing to sacrifice their golden child to protect their own lifestyle. Leo was not innocent. He was taking the money and enjoying the title. But he was too stupid to realize he was wearing a suicide vest his parents had strapped to him. "We need to lock this down with the authorities before the meeting," I said. I do not want this to be a family squabble. I want it to be a federal matter. Marcus nodded. I have drafted the whistleblower complaint for the State Attorney General's Charities Division. We also have a flagged report ready for the IRS regarding the misclassification of funds. I will not file them yet. We will file them the moment the meeting concludes. That way, when you walk out, the clock starts ticking on their investigation. I turned my attention to my day job. Sentinel Logic had been quiet for 2 days, a silence that terrified me more than my mother's screaming. I needed to show them I was in control. I drafted a memo to the Chief Risk Officer. I did not apologize for the bad press. Instead, I attached a redacted version of my forensic audit on the Rivera Renewal Fund. Subject: Mitigation of reputational risk. Message: The allegations against me are part of a localized extortion attempt, which I'm currently dismantling through standard audit procedures. Attached is the preliminary evidence of fraud regarding the opposing party. I am resolving this with extreme prejudice. Expect a full clearance of my name by Monday. It was a gamble. I was showing them that I treated my own family like a hostile algorithm. 2 hours later, I got a reply. Proceed. But keep it clean. We need a verdict, not a drama. That was all the permission I needed. Then, the ping came. It was an email from my mother. The subject line was simply, "The launch." I opened it. It was not a request for a private board meeting anymore. It was a digital invitation to a gala launch and donor appreciation dinner at the Grand Rover Hotel in Raleigh. Dear friends and family, despite recent misunderstandings, the Rivera family is proud to move forward. Join us as we unveil the Rivera Renewal Fund and honor our founding director, Leo Rivera. They were pivoting. They knew I had demanded a meeting to review the books. They were scared to face me in private, so they were changing the venue. They were betting that I would not dare cause a scene in front of the city's elite. They thought the presence of champagne, donors, and press would muzzle me. They thought I would be too embarrassed to ask about fake invoices while they were toasting to the children. I looked at Marcus. They moved the meeting. To where? To a ballroom, I said. They are throwing a party. Marcus frowned. That complicates things. We cannot conduct a deposition during a cocktail hour. No, I said, a cold calm settling over me. We can do something better. They want a show? I will give them a performance review. I picked up the invitation. The event was set for tomorrow night at 7. I am going to attend, I said, and I'm going to bring the audit report with me. Addie, Marcus warned, if you disrupt a private event, they can have you removed for trespassing. You lose the moral high ground. I am not disrupting it, I replied, pointing to the bottom of the invitation where my name was listed in small print. Special thanks to our supervisory director, Adeline Rivera. I am an officer of the foundation. I have a legal right to address the donors. I have a fiduciary duty to inform them of where their money is going. I spent the rest of the night rehearsing. I did not rehearse an emotional speech about abandonment. I rehearsed data points. I memorized the dates of the wire transfers. I memorized the incorporation numbers of the shell companies. I prepared a series of questions that were not accusations, but traps. Leo, can you explain the vetting process for Apex Solutions? Mother, can you clarify the relationship between the foundation and the Vance family? Father, why does the audit show withdrawals for personal travel labeled as site inspections? I would ask them calmly. I would ask them publicly. And when they lied, because they would have to lie, I would have the projector ready. The next evening, I dressed for war. I did not wear a gown. I wore a tailored black suit that cost more than my father's car. I pulled my hair back into a severe tight bun. I applied no makeup other than a sharp line of eyeliner. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a machine sent to balance the equation. I put the folder in my leather briefcase. Inside were 3 copies of the financial audit, and in the hidden pocket, sealed in plastic, were the DNA results and the deed of guardianship. I looked at the mirror one last time. You are not their daughter tonight, I told my reflection. You are the consequences of their actions. I walked out of the hotel room and into the elevator. The descent felt like the countdown to a controlled demolition. The Rivera family had spent 28 years building a facade. Tonight, I was going to pull the pin. The Grand Rover Hotel in Raleigh smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. My mother had outdone herself. The ballroom was draped in gold and cream silk. There were centerpieces of white hydrangeas that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. A string quartet played softly in the corner, providing a tasteful soundtrack to what was essentially a grand larceny in progress. I arrived exactly at 7 o'clock. I wore a sharp charcoal suit with a silk camisole underneath. My hair was pulled back so tight it felt like a helmet. I carried nothing but a slim leather portfolio. To the casual observer, I looked like a lawyer coming to serve papers, which, in a spiritual sense, was exactly what I was doing. I stood at the back of the room, watching my family perform. My father was holding court near the bar, laughing too loudly at a joke made by a local councilman. My mother was flitting between tables, touching arms, flashing her veneered smile, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch, and Leo stood by the podium, looking pale and sweaty in a tuxedo that seemed to be wearing him rather than the other way around. When the lights dimmed, I moved to a table near the front. I did not sit. I stood in the shadows of a pillar, waiting. My mother took the stage. She spoke about legacy. She spoke about giving back. She wiped a tear from her eye when she talked about the sacrifices the Rivera family had made to support the community. And now, she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, I want to invite our executive director, my son Leo, to answer any questions about our vision. Leo stumbled up the stairs. He looked terrified. He mumbled a few words about helping kids, then he opened the floor for questions. Usually, these QA sessions are softballs. Donors ask about tax deductibility or scholarship criteria. I stepped out from the shadow of the pillar. The room went quiet. My heels clicked rhythmically on the parquet floor as I walked toward the center aisle. I have a question, I said. My voice was calm, clear, and carried to the back of the room without a microphone. My mother froze. Her smile faltered, twitching at the corners. My father started pushing his way through the crowd toward the stage. Addie, my mother hissed into the microphone, trying to make it sound like a greeting. We did not think you were coming. This is for donors, darling. I am a donor, I replied, holding up my portfolio. I provided the seed funding, and as the supervisory director listed on your invitation, I have a fiduciary question regarding the vendor list. I didn't wait for permission. I pulled a remote from my pocket. I had tipped the audiovisual technician $200 earlier that evening to let me pair my tablet with the main projector. It was a security flaw I had exploited in corporate boardrooms a dozen times. The screen behind Leo flickered. The logo of the Rivera Renewal Fund vanished. In its place appeared a high-resolution photograph of a UPS store in a strip mall. Can you explain? I asked, my voice cutting through the sudden murmur of the crowd. Why our primary branding agency, Apex Solutions, which receives $12,000 a month, operates out of mailbox 204 next to a vape shop? The room gasped. My father reached the stage. Cut the feed, he shouted at the technician. She is hacking the system. She is unstable. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. It showed a flowchart of bank transfers. And can you explain, I continued, speaking over my father's shouting, why $5,000 of charity funds were transferred to a personal account linked to the executive director's girlfriend on the same day he posted about his grind on Instagram? Leo looked like he was going to faint. He gripped the podium, his knuckles white. This is a lie, my mother screamed, abandoning her poise. She is jealous. She has always been jealous of her brother. She is mentally ill. The guests were standing now. Phones were out. The flash of cameras rippled across the room. I am not jealous, I said, walking closer to the stage. And I am not ill. I am an auditor, and I have already filed a formal request for an independent investigation with the State Attorney General. Here is the confirmation letter. I held up the document. The official seal was visible even from the back row. You are trying to ruin us, my father bellowed, grabbing the microphone from Leo. You ungrateful child. After everything we gave you, we took you in. We raised you. You are nothing but a vindictive, broken girl making up stories. Making up stories? I repeated. I stopped. I looked at the crowd. Then I looked at my parents. You want to talk about stories? I asked softly. Let us talk about the story of where I came from. I opened the portfolio. I took out the envelope Aunt Rosa had left me. You call me ungrateful, I said. You say I am destroying the family name. But the truth is, I was never a Rivera. I was a transaction. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen filled with the scanned image of the deed of private settlement. Next to it was the DNA test results showing 0% maternity. 28 years ago, I said, addressing the silent room. You did not have a daughter. You had a scandal. You bought a baby from a relative to cover up an embezzlement scheme before a local election. You falsified my birth certificate. You erased my history. My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half shriek. She slumped against the heavy velvet curtains. You do not hate me because I am difficult, I said, looking directly at her. You hate me because I am a receipt. I am the living proof of a crime you committed 3 decades ago, and now, you are trying to use my clean name to wash your dirty money again. I turned to Leo. He was crying, silent tears running down his face. He looked at our parents, then at me. He realized in that moment that he wasn't the golden child. He was the fall guy. He was the one whose signature was on the fraudulent checks. Leo, I said gently, step away from the podium. Do not say another word. You are the patsy. He stepped back, his hands shaking. My father stood alone at the microphone. He looked at the donors, the councilmen, the press. He opened his mouth to spin a lie, to charm his way out. But the weight of the evidence projected on the screen behind him was too heavy. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a reputation dying in real time. I have submitted all of this to the authorities, I said. The fund is frozen, the investigation is open, and I am officially resigning. I turned around and walked toward the exit. Addie, my mother screamed after me. A raw, desperate sound. Addie, wait, we can explain. I did not stop. I did not look back. I walked out of the ballroom, past the shocked valet, and into the cool night air of Raleigh. The fallout was swift and total. By Monday, the state attorney general had seized the foundation's assets. My father was facing charges for wire fraud and tax evasion. Leo, thanks to his cooperation and my testimony that he was manipulated, received a plea deal for probation, though his socialite dreams were over. My mother retreated into seclusion, her social circle evaporating the moment the subpoena landed. Sentinel Logic reinstated my contract immediately. They issued a statement praising my unwavering commitment to transparency and ethical standards. My fee for the month remained $5 million, but I did not celebrate. I flew back to Chicago. I walked into my quiet, empty apartment. I went to the closet and pulled out a small box. Inside was the dried, brittle bouquet of carnations I had bought for myself at a gas station 6 years ago. I placed the flowers on the dining table. They looked fragile, dusty, and resilient. I am done, I whispered to the empty room. I had spent my whole life wanting them to remember me. I wanted them to show up. I wanted them to care. But standing there, in the silence of a life I had built with my own hands, I realized I had achieved something far more permanent. I did not need them to remember me with love. I just needed to make sure they could never, ever forget what they had done. The audit was closed. The balance was 0. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Addie's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.